I am so glad to have you here. Welcome to our story family. Follow my story to the end and comment what city you are watching this from. The salty breeze of the Pacific Ocean slipped through the windows of my beach house in Malibu, California. At 71 years old, I had built a life that many would envy. A successful textile factory, a beautiful oceanfront home, and what I thought was a close-knit family. My name is Robert Davis, and I never imagined that my own daughter would try to poison me. It all started that April afternoon with the spring sun bathing my patio. I was reviewing some company documents when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Emily, my only daughter, and her husband, David. Their visits had become strangely frequent in the last few weeks. "Dad!" Emily exclaimed with an enthusiasm that did not reach her eyes. She hugged me briefly while David stayed a step back, wearing that rehearsed smile that I never liked. "What a surprise," I replied, immediately noticing the tension in her shoulders. "Come on in. I was just about to make some coffee." I guided them to the living room overlooking the ocean, that same ocean I had gazed at with my wife, Mary, for 20 years before cancer took her away. It had been 15 years without her, and I still missed her every single day. "Dad, we need to talk about something important," Emily began as she sat down on the couch. David took a seat next to her, putting his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that seemed more possessive than affectionate. "What is it about?" I asked, although something inside me already anticipated the answer. "It is about my boutique," she continued, pulling a folder out of her purse. "I have the opportunity to expand. There are 2 retail spaces available in very exclusive areas of Los Angeles, and with the clientele I already have, it would be a guaranteed success." David chimed in. "It is a safe investment, Mr. Davis. In 2 years, you would double your money." Emily spread several documents across the table. Financial projections, floor plans for the spaces, growth charts. Everything looked a little too perfect, a little too neat. "And how much would you need for this expansion?" I asked directly. Emily and David exchanged a quick glance before she answered. $175,000. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked closely at my daughter, searching her eyes for the little girl I had raised all by myself after losing Mary. I did not find anything familiar there. "That is quite a lot of money," I finally commented. "Dad, you know my boutique is doing great. A bank loan would take way too long, and we would lose the opportunity. It is the absolute perfect time to expand." Something just did not add up. Emily had never been impatient with business. I had raised her to be methodical, to be cautious. "Emily, sweetheart, business should never be rushed," I said with the softest voice I could manage. "These numbers seem a bit too optimistic. I need some time to review them properly." Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a cold expression that I did not recognize in my own daughter. "Time? Dad, I have been preparing this for months. You do not trust me." Her voice went up a pitch, becoming sharper, more desperate. David sat up straight on the couch, his posture suddenly threatening. "Mr. Davis, with all due respect," his voice sounded controlled, but there was something menacing in his words. "Emily has worked incredibly hard on this project. Perhaps we could consider at least a portion of the money as a show of family support." It was the very first time he had ever dared to contradict me directly in my own house. I watched how his hand squeezed Emily's shoulder slightly. "I need time to think," I finally replied. Rushed decisions are rarely good decisions. Emily gathered the documents with abrupt movements. "You have always been like this. You have never truly trusted me." When they left, the slamming of the door echoed throughout the entire house. I stood there looking at the ocean, remembering Emily as a little girl, building sandcastles that the waves always ended up washing away. At what exact moment had my little girl turned into this woman I no longer recognized? That night, I could not sleep. Emily's financial projections did not match up with what I knew about her boutique. Something else was going on, and I needed to figure it out before making any decisions. The following morning, with the very first rays of sunlight filtering through my window, I picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Michael, It is, Robert. I need your help with something delicate. Michael Foster had been my financial director for over 20 years. He was much more than an employee. He was a trusted friend, one of the few I still had left at my age. Of course, Mr. Davis. What is this about? I need you to discreetly look into the financial situation of Emily's boutique. Something just does not feel right. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I will get right on it. I will have some news for you in 2 days. While I waited for the results of the investigation, my mind traveled 5 years back to when David first appeared in Emily's life. She was 32 years old back then. Independent and completely self-assured, she ran her little boutique with absolute passion and common sense. These were qualities I had instilled in her since she was a little girl after her mother's passing. David was handsome and charming at first glance. Impeccable suit, perfect smile, and incredibly sweet words. But there was always something in his eyes that never convinced me, a calculating coldness that completely contrasted with his apparent warmth. He is a real estate developer, Dad, Emily had told me with bright eyes during that very first dinner. He has projects all over the States. And where did you go to college, David? I asked as I poured the wine. Business administration in New York, he replied, without a single second of hesitation. Although true education really comes from the streets, do you not think so, Mr. Davis? His response was flawless, totally rehearsed, way too perfect. 6 months later, Emily called to tell me they had gotten married in an intimate ceremony in Las Vegas, with absolutely no family, no friends, and without her father there to walk her down the aisle. It was totally spontaneous, Dad, she explained with a voice that hardly sounded like her own. We just decided to do it, just the two of us. But Emily had always dreamed of a huge wedding, wearing the white dress her mother had saved for her, with the entire family present. Ever since then, everything completely changed. Her visits became much less frequent. Whenever she did come over, she always seemed nervous, as if she were fulfilling some sort of obligation, instead of actually enjoying our time together. Our conversations turned extremely superficial, constantly filled with awkward silences. The ringing of my phone pulled me right back to the present. It was Michael. Mr. Davis, I found something that you need to know about right away. His voice sounded incredibly worried. It simply cannot wait until tomorrow. An hour later, Michael was standing in my living room holding a folder stuffed with documents. His grave expression confirmed my absolute worst suspicions. Emily's boutique is completely bankrupt, he began, spreading several papers across the coffee table. She is over $300,000 in debt with different suppliers, and the bank is just about to foreclose. My heart completely sank. How is that even possible? She was always so careful with her finances. This all started roughly 2 years ago, Michael continued. Massive cash withdrawals, totally unjustified purchases, and heavy investments in ghost projects. He paused for a second, hesitating. What else, Michael? Tell me everything. Mr. Davis, there is something much worse. His voice dropped to a low whisper. David has a severe gambling addiction. He owes a lot of money to some very dangerous people, and not just to the regular casinos. We are talking about illegal loan sharks, possibly tied to criminal organizations right here in California. The heavy weight of his words crashed down on me like a ton of bricks. My daughter was not just dealing with some financial trouble. She was in genuine danger. How much exactly does David owe? From what I have been able to find out, close to $500,000. And the interest just keeps piling up. Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. They did not want that money to expand her business. They desperately needed it to save their own lives. Over the following few days, Emily and David stepped up their visits, with each one feeling far more tense than the last. Emily looked increasingly nervous, sporting dark circles under her eyes. David was constantly on phone calls that he would abruptly hang up whenever I walked into the room. During our Friday dinner, I watched as Emily barely touched her food, just pushing things around with her fork without ever taking a bite. Dad, have you thought about what we discussed? She finally asked, her voice trembling slightly, about the loan for the boutique. I am definitely considering it, Emily, but I need some more information. David, who had been staring down at his phone all night long, looked up with an irritated expression. "Mr. Davis, we really need an answer soon. There are several other investors who are interested, but we would much rather keep this in the family." The lie was so painfully obvious that I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "What other investors?" I asked innocently. Maybe I could talk to them, just to compare the terms. The sudden paleness on David's face completely confirmed my suspicions. Emily jumped in quickly. "They are David's contacts. You do not know them." "I see," I replied, taking a slow sip of my wine. "And how exactly is the boutique doing right now? It has been quite a while since I stopped by." Emily and David exchanged another quick glance. "It is doing great, Dad. The customers just keep pouring in." That was another lie. According to Michael's investigation, the boutique had lost 60% of its clientele over the last year and was currently only opening its doors 3 days a week. The very next day, Michael brought me the news that completely finished the puzzle. "I found something else, Mr. Davis," he said, handing me a few photographs. "David has been meeting with this guy." He pointed to an incredibly intimidating-looking man. "His name is Victor Vance, a notorious illegal loan shark tied to criminal organizations right here on the West Coast. The police have been investigating him for years, but they have never been able to formally charge him." In another picture, Emily was standing right there with them, her face completely distorted by pure fear. "They are completely desperate, Mr. Davis," Michael continued, "and desperate people often commit desperate acts." His words echoed in my mind like a very sinister warning. 3 days after I officially denied Emily the $175,000, I received a phone call from her. "Dad, I want to apologize for the way I acted." Her voice sounded much calmer than it had in previous days. "I have just been extremely stressed with work. How about we come over tonight and make you a special dinner? Just like the old days." The proposal really caught me off guard. Emily rarely cooked anything ever since she married David. "A dinner?" I asked, trying hard to keep my tone casual. "Yes, your absolute favorite, seafood pasta, Mom's special recipe." Her mentioning Mary struck a very sensitive chord deep inside me. "I will buy all the ingredients. I just need to use your kitchen." I accepted the offer. I agreed more out of pure curiosity than actual appetite. Something just did not feel right about this sudden display of family affection. That afternoon, while I waited for them to arrive, I called Carol Vega, my neighbor and dear friend of over 15 years. Carol had been a high school literature teacher before she retired, and she possessed a sharp intuition that I had always admired. "Carol, could you keep an eye out tonight? Emily and David are coming over for dinner, and I just have a very bad feeling about it." "Of course, Robert. You know you can always count on me. Do you want me to drop by at some point just to make sure everything is okay?" "I would really appreciate that. Maybe around 9 o'clock, just make up any excuse." At exactly 7 o'clock, Emily and David arrived. She was carrying bags full of fresh ingredients and immediately got to work in the kitchen with a very nervous energy. David sat down in the living room, completely absorbed in his phone as usual. I sat at the kitchen counter, quietly watching Emily as she prepared the seafood pasta. Her hands were shaking slightly as she chopped the vegetables, and she completely avoided making eye contact with me. "How is everything going, really?" I asked softly. "Fine, Dad. Everything is totally fine," she replied way too quickly. "Just a little bit of work stress, you know how it is. And David seems pretty worried lately." Emily tensed up visibly. "He is fine. He just has some major projects going on right now." I watched her add the ingredients to the pasta. The peppers, the tomatoes, the special spices. Everything looked completely normal, but I noticed that she kept glancing toward the living room every so often just to make sure David was still distracted by his phone. At one point, when she briefly stepped out of the kitchen to grab something from her purse, I leaned over the cooking pan just to check the aroma. That was exactly when I detected it. A sweet, almost chemical smell hiding underneath the spices. It was nearly imperceptible, but it was definitely out of place. When Emily walked back in, I smiled as if absolutely nothing had happened. My mind was racing a mile a minute. Was my very own daughter really trying to poison me? "Dad, "Could you grab the white wine from the fridge?" Emily asked as she finished preparing the pasta. "I think a nice Chardonnay would pair perfectly with the seafood." While I dug around for the wine, I made a firm decision. If my suspicions were actually true, I needed solid proof, not just wild guesses. Dinner was served at exactly 8:30. Emily placed the plates on the table with a very tight smile. "I made this especially for you, Dad," she said in a tone that desperately tried to sound affectionate, but it just rang hollow. That strange chemical scent was much stronger now, wafting right up from the plate sitting directly in front of me. I looked at my daughter suspiciously while she forced a fake smile. David, as always, seemed completely oblivious to everything around him, totally focused on his phone. With a very subtle and calculated move, I quickly swapped my plate with his while Emily turned her back to pour the wine. "It looks absolutely delicious," I commented, raising my glass high. "To family." And Emily raised her glass with a trembling hand. "To family," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. We ate in a heavy silence that was only interrupted by trivial questions about the weather and the local news. I watched closely as David devoured the pasta without suspecting a single thing, while Emily barely touched a bite of her own food. "Are you not hungry, sweetheart?" I asked her innocently. "You cooked such a wonderful meal, and you have barely tasted it." "I just do not have much of an appetite," she mumbled quietly. "I have been snacking all day long while I was cooking." Right in the middle of our dinner, the doorbell suddenly rang. It was Carol, exactly as we had agreed. "Good evening, Robert. Please forgive the interruption, but I just wanted to return that book you lent me." She spoke so naturally, quickly evaluating the entire situation in the room. I invited her in and introduced her to Emily and David. Carol, perceptive as she always was, immediately picked up on the thick tension in the room. "Do you guys mind if I join you for dessert? I actually just baked an almond pie." "Of course not," I replied, feeling incredibly grateful for her presence. Emily seemed very uncomfortable with the unexpected guest, but she managed to keep up her polite facade. David kept right on eating, oblivious to everything except for his plate and occasional glances down at his phone. About an hour after we started dinner, the inevitable finally happened. David, who had consumed almost his entire portion, started to show signs of severe discomfort. His forehead broke out in a heavy sweat, and his breathing became completely irregular. "Are you feeling okay?" Carol asked, watching him with apparent concern. "I just feel a little dizzy," he replied, slowly loosening his tie. It must be the wine. But he had barely even touched the wine. Just a few minutes later, David completely collapsed, unconscious, right onto the dining table. Emily's screams echoed throughout the entire house. "David! David!" Her voice broke as she desperately tried to wake him up. Carol acted fast, immediately checking his vital signs. "He is alive, but he needs urgent medical attention. I am going to call an ambulance right now." The man who had been eating straight from my plate was lying there completely motionless, his face pale white, his lips turning slightly purple. Emily was shaking him desperately, but her eyes did not show the genuine shock she should have been feeling. It was panic, but it was the exact panic of someone who knew precisely what had just happened. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics hauled David away while Emily followed close behind, playing the role of the devastated wife perfectly. "I will ride with him to the hospital." She said it while completely avoiding making eye contact with me. "I will call you the second I know anything." But I just stood there in that kitchen, staring blankly at those two empty plates, feeling my entire world crumble around me. My daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much love after becoming a widower, had actually tried to kill me. "Robert?" Carol broke the heavy silence once we were finally left alone. "What exactly just happened here?" I told her absolutely everything. The massive request for money, Michael's deep investigation, my strong suspicions about the dinner, the switching of the plates. "Oh my goodness, Robert." Her eyes filled with pure horror. "Are you entirely sure? Do you honestly believe that Emily just tried to poison you?" "I really do not want to believe it, Carol," I replied, feeling the heavy weight of every single word. "But all of the evidence points right to it." Carol gently took my hand in hers. We need concrete proof before we start throwing around any accusations. If this is true, it is extremely serious." I nodded, feeling a sudden surge of determination that I had not experienced in years. "We are going to find them." Emily returned from the hospital about 3 hours later. Her eyes were completely bloodshot, and her makeup was running down her face. She collapsed into a kitchen chair in the exact same spot where everything had just gone down. "David is stable, but the doctors do not understand what happened," she said with a shaking voice. "They are saying it was some sort of severe poisoning." Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she tried to pour herself a glass of water. "Dad, I need you to tell me exactly what you cooked. The doctors really need to know what ingredients you used." I looked her dead in the eyes. "I did not cook a single thing, Emily. You prepared that special dinner just for me, do you not remember?" Her face visibly lost all its color. "Yes, but I used all of your ingredients, your regular recipe." There was a growing sense of panic in her voice that completely confirmed my worst suspicions. "Why did you switch the plates, Dad? Why did David end up eating your portion?" I slowly stood up from my chair, feeling every single one of my 71 years in my bones, because the smell seemed very strange to me. "Sweetheart, there was something in that food that definitely should not have been there." Emily avoided looking at me, pretending to scroll through her phone. "I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about, Dad. You are just upset about what happened. Maybe you should get some rest." But I could not rest. I could not just pretend that I had not seen what I had so clearly seen. My whole life, I had always trusted my gut instincts, and right now they were screaming at me that my own daughter had betrayed me in the most cruel way imaginable. "Emily, look right at me," I said with a very firm voice. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you did not put anything strange into my food." She looked up at me, but only for a split second. "Of course I did not, Dad. How could you even think something like that? I am your daughter. I love you. I would never hurt you." Every single word sounded so hollow, like a terribly rehearsed script. "Do not lie to me, Emily. Not after everything we have been through together." Something in my tone must have tipped her off, because her entire attitude shifted instantly. "I do not know what you think is going on, Dad, but you are completely wrong. I came over here to cook you a nice dinner, and now my husband is laying in a hospital bed. I should really be with him right now instead of listening to your absurd accusations." She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "I will call you tomorrow when you have calmed down. Do you know what the doctors are going to find when they pump David's stomach?" I asked, right before she reached the front door. "Do you know exactly what plant produces that peculiar sweet smell I caught in the pasta?" She stopped dead in her tracks, her hand completely frozen over the doorknob. "Oleander," I continued, "one of the most toxic plants in California. It grows all over the West Coast, even right there in the community garden at your apartment building. It causes symptoms that can be very easily mistaken for a massive heart attack." Emily turned around slowly, her face a tight mask of contained panic. "Dad, you are completely delusional. You really need help." "I already called for some help," I answered very calmly. "I had a long talk with Michael. I know everything about the heavy debts at the boutique, about David's severe gambling problem, and about all that money you guys owe to Victor Vance." All the color completely drained from her face. "You have no idea what you are talking about. That $175,000 was never meant to expand your business, was it? It was meant to save your lives." Emily leaned back against the heavy wooden door. Her legs looked like they were just about to give out on her. "He is going to kill us, Dad," she finally whispered. "If we do not pay him back soon, he is going to hurt us. He told us we had exactly 1 more week. At the absolute most." Her terrifying words confirmed my worst fears, but there was still one incredibly important question left to ask. "What exactly did you put in my food, Emily?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a heavy authority that did not allow for any dodging. "Tell me exactly what you put into my meal." "Oleander," she mumbled so quietly that I could barely even hear her. "Crushed oleander leaves. David got them for me. He promised it would look exactly like a natural heart attack. Her dark confession filled the empty air between us like an invisible poison. I felt physically sick to my stomach, not because of the danger I had just been in, but because of the sheer magnitude of what I had just confirmed. Dad, please, you have to understand. We did not have any other choice. They were going to kill both of us. I sat back down slowly, carefully processing the gravity of what I was hearing. My own daughter had planned to murder me with Oleander, one of the deadliest plants in the United States. And then what, Emily? Right after you killed me, what exactly was supposed to happen next? My voice was strangely calm, as if we were just discussing the daily weather and not my very own premeditated murder. We were going to inherit everything, she said, still avoiding my eyes. The beach house, the textile company, all your investments. It was more than enough to pay off our debts and just start over. She paused for a second, as if she finally realized just how monstrous her words really sounded. But Dad, I swear to you that I never wanted to do it. David completely pressured me into it. He said it was the only possible way to save ourselves. David pressured you? I repeated, feeling a hot rage bubbling up inside my chest. Emily, you are a fully grown adult woman. Nobody can pressure you into murdering your very own father. I stood up abruptly, walking over to the large window just to put some physical distance between us. Do you realize what this actually means? Do you have any idea what you just confessed to? Emily stepped closer too, taking very hesitant steps. Dad, please, you cannot tell anyone about this. If you call the cops, David and I will go straight to prison, and those dangerous people will just keep coming after us. Her hands reached out for my arm, but I pulled away sharply. Please, we can definitely find another way out of this. Just loan me the money and we will go far away. You will never have to see us ever again. Loan you the money? My voice shot up several octaves. Right after you literally tried to kill me, right after you planned out my death like it was just some sort of business transaction, I spun around to face her directly. Emily, are you even listening to yourself? Do you hear how absolutely absurd your request is? Dad, I am your daughter, she cried out, her voice cracking. I am the only family you have left in this world. If you turn me over to the police, you will be left completely alone. Her words were a twisted mix of begging and an emotional threat. Do you really want that? Do you really want to spend your final years with no family, knowing that you destroyed your own daughter's life? Her emotional blackmail hurt me deeply, but it also filled me with a sudden clarity that I had not felt in days. Emily, you destroyed our entire relationship the exact second you decided to poison me. I am not responsible for the consequences of your terrible actions. I walked right over to the front door, pulling it wide open. I want you to get out of my house right now. Right this second. What are you going to do? She asked, with obvious panic rising in her voice. Are you really going to call the cops? Are you going to destroy your own family out of pure revenge? She moved toward the door, but stopped right before stepping outside. Dad, think about this very carefully. Once you make that final decision, there is absolutely no turning back. You will lose us forever. I already lost you, I replied, with a deep sadness that cut me right down to my bones. I lost you the very moment you decided that my death was an acceptable solution to your money problems. I pointed directly outside. Leave, Emily. Leave right now before I do something that we will both deeply regret. She stood frozen in the doorway for a moment that felt like an absolute eternity. Dad, if you do this, you will be signing my death warrant. Those people do not ever forgive. Without that money, David and I will have nowhere left to hide. Her final plea carried a desperate tone that almost broke my firm resolve. You really should have thought about that before you tried to murder me. I said it while slowly pushing the heavy door closed. You should have considered the severe consequences before deciding that my life was worth less than your debts. The sound of that door shutting echoed through the entire house like the tragic end of an era. I stood there alone in the foyer, listening to Emily's hurried footsteps fading away down the driveway. My legs were shaking so violently that I had to lean against the wall just to keep from falling over. I had just kicked my very own daughter out of my house after discovering she had actively tried to kill me. The harsh reality of the situation hit me like a massive emotional avalanche. I ran out of my house like a desperate fugitive with nowhere to go, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst right out of my chest. My 71-year-old legs automatically carried me straight to Carol's house, the only person left in this world who could possibly understand what had just happened without judging me like some crazy old man who had completely lost his mind. I pounded on her front door with desperate knocks, not even caring that it was already 11 o'clock at night. "Carol, please, open up! It is Robert. I need help." My voice kept cracking between heavy sobs that I had been holding back for hours. When she finally cracked the door open, dressed in her purple bathrobe with her hair up in rollers, her expression instantly shifted from mild surprise to deep maternal concern. "Robert, what happened?" she asked, throwing the door wide open. "You are shaking all over. Come inside. Come inside right this second." Her warm hands gently guided me into her living room, where she sat me down on her favorite couch while she went to brew some chamomile tea with quick, very efficient movements. "Carol, you are not going to believe what just happened to me." I said it while accepting the steaming mug into my trembling hands. "My very own daughter tried to poison me. Emily wanted to kill me for my money." The words came rushing out like a massive flood that I had been holding back for days. And when I finally confronted her, she confessed to absolutely everything. She told me they put oleander into my food. Carol sat right down across from me, taking my shaking hands in hers, her honey-colored eyes completely filled with genuine horror. "What are you saying, Robert? Emily actually tried to poison you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking any louder would somehow make the whole situation even more real. "Tell me absolutely everything right from the start. Do not skip a single detail." For the next hour, I recounted the entire nightmare. The massive request for money, my deep suspicions, the special dinner, the swapping of the plates, David collapsing, Emily's dark confession. Carol listened in complete silence, nodding occasionally, her expression growing much more grave with every single word I spoke. "Robert, this is way more serious than you think," she finally said, standing up to pace around the room. "If Emily was capable of trying to poison you once, she could easily try to do it again. Now that she knows that you know the whole truth, you are a major liability to her." She stopped right in front of me, crossing her arms tightly. "You cannot go back to your house alone. It is entirely too dangerous." "But what am I supposed to do, Carol?" I asked, feeling the crushing weight of the entire situation pressing down on me. She is my daughter. Despite absolutely everything, she is still my little girl. I cannot just hand her over to the cops. My tears fell down into my mug, mixing right in with the hot liquid. My whole life I have loved her. I have protected her. I have taken care of her. How did we ever get to this point? Carol sat down beside me, wrapping me in a warm hug that I had not received in years. "Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. A father's unconditional love does not mean you have to just let them murder you. Emily made a truly terrible decision, and now she has to face the consequences." Her voice was incredibly firm but still very warm. "You did not turn her into a murderer. She chose that dark path all on her own. But I am so incredibly alone, Carol." I sobbed heavily against her shoulder. "Emily is all the family I have left. If I turn her in, I will be left entirely alone in this world." The harsh reality of my situation hit me like an absolute avalanche. I had nobody else. No other children, no siblings. My parents passed away decades ago. "You are not alone," she stated with a fierce determination that truly surprised me. "You have me, and we are going to get through this together." She pulled back just to look me squarely in the eyes. "Robert, for the past 15 years you have been so much more than just a neighbor to me. You are the brother of my heart, and I am not going to let your own daughter hurt you." Her words moved me incredibly deeply. Throughout all these years, I had been so intensely focused on my relationship with Emily that I never even realized I had someone else who genuinely cared about me. But what can we even do? I have no concrete proof. I only have her verbal confession, and she could easily deny the whole thing. We have to be very smart about this, she said, getting up to grab a notebook and a pen. First, we need to document absolutely everything that has happened. Every single detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence we might have. She started writing as she spoke. Second, we need to keep you protected. You cannot be alone until we get this sorted out. Do you really think she would try to hurt me again? I asked, although deep down I already knew the grim answer. I mean, she knows that I know everything. It would be way too obvious if something happened to me right now. Carol looked at me with a deadly seriousness that chilled my blood. Robert, when someone completely crosses the line of trying to murder their own father, we can no longer predict what else they are capable of. Emily is completely desperate, and desperate people make incredibly irrational decisions. She closed the notebook and sat down facing me. Besides, from what you just told me, she owes money to some very dangerous people. If she cannot get your money the easy way, she might try to get it the hard way. The night dragged on very slowly. Carol insisted that I sleep at her house, and for the very first time in days, I actually felt safe. But sleep did not come easily at all. Every single time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face confessing that she had tried to poison me. I saw that terribly fake smile while she served me that special dinner. I saw years of deep manipulation that I had blindly ignored out of fatherly love. By 6 a.m, Carol was already up and preparing a nice breakfast. The smell of freshly brewed coffee floated throughout the house, giving me a fake sense of normalcy that brutally contrasted with the terrible reality I was facing. "You slept a little bit, but definitely not enough," she said, serving me some black coffee and toast. "Today we have to make some extremely important decisions. We cannot let ourselves be paralyzed by fear or guilt." I felt strangely clear-headed despite having barely slept for a few hours. Emily's ultimate betrayal had awakened a deep survival instinct in me that I thought I had long forgotten. "What do you suggest?" I asked, incredibly grateful for the simple normalcy of a morning routine after the absolute nightmare of the night before. Honestly, I do not even know where to begin. I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this. Carol sat across from me with her very own mug of coffee. Her face, lined with wrinkles that revealed a long life of deep experiences, showed an absolute iron determination. "First, we are going to walk over to your house together so you can grab a few things," she said, "but we are going to be extremely careful. If we see any sign whatsoever that Emily or David are anywhere near there, we are leaving immediately." She took a slow sip of her coffee before continuing. "Second, we need to talk to someone who can help us out legally. A good lawyer, maybe the police. What if Emily was telling the truth about those dangerous people?" I asked, feeling that cold fear wash over me all over again. What if by turning her in, we are actually sentencing her to death? The paternal guilt I had carried my entire life intensified wildly. Carol reached her hand across the table and held mine tight. "Robert, listen to me very carefully. Emily and David created this whole mess. You are not responsible for the consequences of their terrible decisions. Your job as a father does not include letting yourself be murdered just to save your daughter from her own fatal mistakes." Her words, although incredibly harsh, were completely loaded with the truth. I nodded slowly, carefully processing the deep wisdom in them. We walked back to my house at 10 a.m, with Carol walking right by my side like a protective bodyguard. Her steps were firm, and her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, searching for any possible sign of danger. "If we see David's car or anything remotely suspicious, we are leaving immediately." She reminded me for the third time as we walked up the long driveway toward my front door. The house felt entirely different the moment we stepped inside. It was not just my overactive imagination. There was a very heavy atmosphere, as if the very walls had absorbed the dark betrayal from the night before. Carol walked straight toward the kitchen while I stayed frozen in the foyer, completely paralyzed by the memories of everything that had just gone down in these rooms. "Robert, get in here right now!" Carol yelled from the kitchen. Her voice carried a sheer urgency that made me run straight toward her. "Look at this! Just look at what I found!" She was standing in front of the sink, holding something carefully in her hands with a dish towel. It was a small glass jar, the kind used for kitchen spices, but it was labeled with handwriting that I instantly recognized. It was Emily's handwriting. "Crushed oleander," the label read. Carol held it extremely carefully, completely avoiding any direct contact with it. "I found it hidden way behind the other spices. Your daughter left the murder weapon right here." My heart stopped completely. Seeing the actual physical proof of what Emily had done made everything feel even more real, even more devastating. "She really did it," I mumbled, feeling my old legs turn to pure jelly. "She actually brought poison into my home and put it right into my food." "There is more," Carol said, systematically opening up all the cabinets. "Look, there are used latex gloves right here in the trash, and this kitchen rag has green residue on it, probably from the leaves she crushed up." Every single piece of evidence she found felt like another sharp stab to my heart. "Robert, this was not some spur-of-the-moment impulse. This was planned out, highly calculated, and totally premeditated." Carol started snapping pictures of absolutely everything with her cell phone. "We need to fully document every single piece of proof before someone comes back to destroy it," she explained while photographing the jar from several different angles. "If Emily realizes she left these things behind, she will definitely come back to wipe her prints." "What else could be here?" I asked, feeling a twisted mix of pure horror and morbid curiosity. What else could we possibly find that shows just how far they planned this out? I started checking my own cupboards, looking for anything slightly out of place. "Let us check her bedroom," Carol suggested. The bedroom where she always stayed when she came to visit. Maybe she left something up there too. We walked up to the second floor, where Emily had spent so many nights throughout her childhood and teenage years. The room was still decorated exactly the way she had left it when she moved in with David. The bed had the same blue quilt she had picked out at 15 years old. The shelves held all her favorite books, and there were some photos of her teenage years hanging on the walls. Carol walked straight over to the desk, digging through the drawers and loose papers. "There is something right here," she said, pulling out a sheet of paper that had been folded up under a heavy book. "It is a handwritten list." She unfolded the paper and began reading it out loud. "Oleander. Get fresh leaves, latex gloves, mortar and pestle for crushing. Perfect opportunity. Special dinner. Call ambulance after 30 minutes. The dark list was written out in Emily's clear and perfectly neat handwriting. The exact same handwriting I had seen on thousands of affectionate notes she had written me when she was just a little girl. Seeing those terrible words written by her own hand made reality hit me like a massive emotional tsunami. "It is a to-do list for my murder," I said, my voice completely breaking. My own daughter wrote out a step-by-step list of instructions on how to kill me. "There is actually more," Carol continued, reading down the rest of the page. "It says right here, check if changes are necessary. Estimated liquid inheritance, $2.5 million. David's debts, $500,000. Plenty left over for a brand new life. Robert, they calculated the exact amount of money they would get from your death." I sat down heavily on the bed where Emily had slept as a child. The very same sheets she had chosen as a teenager were still there, freshly washed and ironed, just waiting for her next visit. How could I have been so incredibly blind? I asked myself out loud. How did I not see that my own daughter had turned into this monster? Carol sat right beside me, holding my hands tight in hers. "Because you are a good father who loves his daughter. Because you trusted her. Exactly as you were supposed to. You did absolutely nothing wrong, Robert. She chose this dark path all on her own." Her words were comforting, but they could not erase the immense guilt that was eating me alive. "Let us keep looking," she said softly. "The more evidence we can gather, the stronger we will be when we decide what to do next." We kept searching the room very methodically. Inside the closet, hidden right behind some old shoeboxes, Carol found something that froze our blood completely. "Robert, come look at this," she called out with a trembling voice. In her hands, she was holding a thick manila envelope stuffed with papers. "These are copies of your will, your bank statements, and your life insurance policies." She started sorting through the documents one by one. "There are handwritten calculations right here about how long it would take to liquidate your investments right after your death." The envelope also contained something that completely shattered my soul. A sealed letter that I had never seen before, addressed directly to me, dated 3 weeks prior. "Dear Dad," the letter began, written in Emily's handwriting. "If you are actually reading this, it means that something went terribly wrong with our plan. I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you, but we really had no other choice. David and I are in genuine danger, and your death was the absolute only way to get the money fast enough." Carol continued reading the letter completely out loud. "Please forgive me. I know it is terrible, but I really hoped it would be fast and that you would not suffer at all. The oleander we are going to use will cause a massive heart attack that will look totally natural. The doctors will just assume it was old age and heavy stress. They will never know that it was intentional." The letter went on with highly specific details about how they planned to dispose of all the evidence, how she would play the role of a grieving daughter at the funeral, and exactly how they would distribute the cash once they got the inheritance. "After paying off David's debts, we plan to move to another country where we can just start over. Maybe Costa Rica or Mexico, where our money will go much further. It is a complete step-by-step manual on how to murder your own father and get away with it," Carol said, with pure disgust evident in her voice. "Robert, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was not some desperate last-minute decision. They have been planning this out for weeks." She folded the letter up very carefully and slipped it right back into the envelope. "We also found a second sheet of paper completely covered in numbers and detailed calculations. Here is the entire financial plan," Carol said, closely studying the numbers. "They calculated exactly how much they needed to pay off their debts, how much they would have left over to live on, and they even researched the cost of living down in those countries. This is absolutely chilling." "What else is hiding in that envelope?" I asked, although I was not entirely sure I even wanted to know. Every single revelation was far worse than the last, and I felt like I was discovering that my own daughter was a complete stranger. "There are some receipts in here," Carol said, pulling out several small slips of paper. "A receipt from a local nursery for some special ornamental plants. A printed-out internet search about the exact symptoms of oleander poisoning. And what is this?" She stopped, staring down at a piece of paper with a highly shocked expression. "It is a printed web search on how to act like a grieving family member to avoid any police suspicion." The entire bedroom was spinning around me. My daughter had not only planned to murder me, but she had meticulously researched exactly how to fake her grief over my dead body. How could she possibly turn into this? I mumbled, feeling extremely nauseous. At what exact moment did the sweet little girl I raised turn into such a calculating killer? "I really do not know, Robert," Carol replied with brutal honesty. "But what I do know is that we have more than enough hard evidence to prove that this was entirely premeditated. You can no longer have any doubts about what to do next. This goes way beyond a simple mistake or a desperate choice." Carol sealed the envelope with all the evidence inside and looked at me with a fierce determination I had never seen in her before. "Robert, we need professional help immediately. This is no longer something we can handle on our own." Her voice was firm, but I could clearly detect the deep fear she was trying so hard to hide. "We have to call the police and get a good lawyer. There is no turning back now." "Wait," I said, starting to panic at the terrifying thought of getting the authorities involved. "Can we not just try to handle this as a family first? Maybe if I confront Emily with all this proof, we can come to some sort of agreement." I knew it sounded absolutely ridiculous, but the desperate father inside of me was still clinging on to the thin hope that there was a solution that would not completely destroy my little girl. Carol grabbed me tightly by the shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes. "Robert, listen to me very carefully. Your daughter literally wrote out a detailed manual on how to murder you and get away with it. There is absolutely no family agreement possible here. This is premeditated attempted murder." Her voice softened a bit, but it remained just as firm. "If we do not do something right now, the very next time she will not make the silly mistake of swapping the plates. Next time, she will make damn sure there are no errors." We walked downstairs in complete silence, each of us totally lost in our own dark thoughts. When we reached the kitchen, Carol immediately started making phone calls. "Hello, I need the number of a criminal defense lawyer who can handle a major emergency." She spoke into the phone while I stood there like a stone statue, still struggling to process everything we had just found. The lawyer we found, Richard Monroe, arrived at my house exactly 2 hours later. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and a highly serious expression that inspired deep trust. "Mr. Davis." Carol briefly explained the situation to me over the phone. "You can tell me absolutely everything right from the start." He sat down in my living room with a yellow legal pad, fully prepared to take detailed notes. I recounted the whole nightmare once again. The heavy request for cash, my growing suspicions, the deep investigation I did into their finances, the special dinner, the swapping of the plates, Emily's confession, and finally all the physical proof we had found just that morning. Richard took constant notes, asking very specific questions about exact dates, times, and small details. "This is extremely serious," he said when I finally finished my story. "We have physical evidence of the poison, written documents proving massive premeditation, and a direct verbal confession from the accused." He closed his legal pad and looked at me gravely. "Mr. Davis, this clearly constitutes first-degree attempted murder. Your daughter could easily face anywhere between 15 and 25 years in federal prison." The lawyer's heavy words hit me like a sledgehammer. 25 years? I repeated with a completely broken voice. My daughter could spend the rest of her life rotting in prison. The sheer reality of the legal consequences completely overwhelmed me. Is there any possible way to reduce the charges? Any way that this does not completely destroy her entire life? Richard looked at me with deep professional compassion. "Sir, I totally understand that she is your daughter, but we have to be incredibly realistic here. The level of planning you just described, the massive documentary evidence, the fact that she actively researched specific poisoning methods, all of this points to a highly premeditated crime." He took a short pause before continuing. "However, the very fact that you actually survived could play slightly in her favor during a plea bargain. What if I just do not press any charges?" I asked, desperately clinging to any possibility of protecting Emily. "What if I simply let her go and never ever speak of this again?" I knew it was an incredibly desperate question, but I just needed to know all of my options. Carol jumped right in before Richard could even answer. "Robert, are you really listening to yourself? Do you honestly want to set someone free who just tried to murder you so she can try to do it all over again?" Her voice held a deep frustration that I had never ever heard directed at me. "And what about the very next person that Emily and David decide to rob or hurt when they eventually run out of money?" Richard nodded very grimly. "Carol is completely right. Furthermore, legally speaking, now that we have concrete knowledge of a felony, we are absolutely obligated to report it. If we do not do it, we could actually become accessories after the fact." He looked directly into my eyes. "Mr. Davis, I understand that this is totally devastating, but you do not have a legal choice here. We have to get the authorities involved. What would be the very next step?" Carol asked, fully taking control of the entire situation when she clearly saw that I was way too overwhelmed to continue. "What do we need to do exactly to proceed the right way?" "First, we need to carefully preserve all the evidence," Richard explained. "We cannot touch another thing without wearing gloves. We need the police to come over here and properly document the crime scene." He pulled out his cell phone. "Second, we need to file a formal police report. Third, we need to obtain a strict restraining order against Emily and David just to keep Mr. Davis safe." The exact word crime echoed loudly in my mind like a funeral bell. My beautiful home had officially turned into a real crime scene. The cozy kitchen where I had cooked thousands of warm meals for my family was now key evidence in an attempted murder case. How long will this whole process take? I asked, feeling my normal life slipping away forever. The entire legal process could easily take months, quite possibly years, Richard answered very honestly, but the immediate protective measures should be in full effect within the next 24 hours. He looked at me with deep seriousness. Mr. Davis, in the meantime, you simply cannot be alone. It is way too dangerous. Do you have a safe place where you can stay? He can stay with me for as long as he needs to. Carol jumped in instantly. My house has a great security system, and I live right on a busy street. It will be much harder for Emily to try anything over there. Her generous offer filled me with deep gratitude and relief. Richard immediately started making the necessary phone calls. First, he called the local police to report the felony and request that they come out to process the scene. Then he called the courthouse to kickstart the restraining order process. The police will be here in exactly 1 hour, he informed us. They will need to take formal statements from both of you and professionally photograph all of the evidence. What exactly is going to happen when they arrest Emily? I asked, feeling the harsh reality of the situation becoming much more concrete with every single step we took. Are they going to show up at her apartment with blaring sirens and handcuffs? Is it going to be entirely public? Will it be all over the local news? It really depends on how the police decide to proceed, Richard explained. They might just call her and ask her to turn herself in voluntarily, or they might go out and arrest her directly. Given the incredibly high level of premeditation, they will probably opt for a direct arrest. He took a slight pause. As for the media, we will try our best to keep this entirely private, but I absolutely cannot guarantee anything once it goes to trial. The terrible thought of the situation becoming public terrified me deeply. People are going to know that my very own daughter tried to murder me. The heavy shame and humiliation just added right on top of the deep pain and betrayal I was already feeling. They are going to think that I am a terrible father who raised a cold-blooded killer. Carol walked over and hugged me incredibly tight. People will see that you are a brave victim who had the true courage to do the right thing, even when it was the absolute hardest thing in the world. Her voice was firm and very comforting. And anyone who judges you for Emily's actions simply does not deserve your worry. When the police finally arrived, everything became incredibly surreal. 2 detectives, a woman named Detective Lucy Smith and a man named Detective Jason Stone, fully took control of my house, photographed absolutely everything, packaged the physical evidence into special plastic bags, and took highly detailed statements from both Carol and me. Mr. Davis? Detective Smith told me right after reviewing all of the evidence, this is honestly one of the best documented attempted homicide cases I have ever seen. Your daughter and your son-in-law are going to face some incredibly serious charges. Her tone was highly professional, yet very compassionate. I know this must be completely devastating for you, but you definitely did the right thing by reporting it. The actual arrest took place at the crack of dawn the very next day. Carol and I were eating breakfast in her kitchen when my cell phone suddenly rang. It was Detective Smith. Mr. Davis, we just arrested Emily over at her apartment. David is still in the hospital, but he is under heavy police custody. Her voice sounded professional, but I could definitely detect a slight hint of satisfaction. Emily actively resisted the arrest and denied everything initially, but when we showed her the hard evidence, she broke down entirely. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the phone. Knowing that my little girl was sitting inside a police cell brought me a twisted mix of relief and pure devastation that I had no idea how to process. What happens now? I asked while Carol held my free hand tightly for support. There will be a formal arraignment hearing this afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock, the detective explained. You can attend if you wish, but it is not mandatory. We also want to inform you that we actually found even more evidence over at Emily's place. She had an entire notebook filled with detailed plans, including several alternative ways to hurt you just in case the poison failed. Those terrible words hit me like a solid punch straight to the gut. My daughter had not only planned to poison me, but she actually had backup plans to murder me in entirely different ways. What kind of alternative plans? I asked, although I was not really sure I wanted to know the answer. I would highly prefer not to go into those details over the phone, the detective replied very diplomatically. But I can honestly tell you that this fully confirms the poisoning attempt was not some desperate impulse. It was just one part of a highly elaborate scheme to get her hands on your inheritance. She took a brief pause. Mr. Davis, we also discovered that David actually owes money to criminal organizations that are far more dangerous than we initially thought. After hanging up the phone, I sat there in complete silence for several minutes. Carol totally respected my need to process all the information without pressuring me to speak. I finally broke the heavy silence. Carol, I think I really want to go to that hearing. I need to look her straight in the eyes. I need to hear exactly what she has to say now that she can no longer lie. Are you absolutely sure? Carol asked with deep concern. It is going to be incredibly difficult emotionally. Seeing Emily in handcuffs, listening to those formal charges, she leaned in closer to me. You really do not have to torture yourself by witnessing all of that. You can just stay far away and let the justice system run its course. No, I replied with a fierce determination that surprised even me. I have spent my entire life protecting her from the consequences of her own actions. I was always the father who fixed her problems, who defended her whenever she got into deep trouble, who constantly gave her second chances. I stood up from the kitchen table feeling a very strange clarity. This time, I need to watch her face the real consequences of what she actually did. We arrived at the courthouse exactly 2 hours before the hearing began. Richard met us right at the front entrance and explained exactly what we should expect. Emily will walk in wearing handcuffs and a standard prison uniform. The judge will read the formal charges out loud: attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent. His voice was dead serious. After that, her defense attorney will request bail, and the prosecution will argue that she needs to remain in police custody. When we finally walked into the courtroom, my heart was beating so fast that I thought everyone could hear it. The room was freezing cold and completely impersonal, filled with hard wooden benches and bright fluorescent lights that gave it a very gloomy look. I sat down in the very first row with Carol right by my side and Richard sitting just behind us. When they finally brought Emily out, I hardly even recognized her. Her hair was a complete mess. Her face was completely swollen from crying so much, and the bright orange prison jumpsuit made her look incredibly small and totally vulnerable. But what struck me the absolute most were her eyes. When she saw me sitting right there in the front row, her expression shifted from deep sadness to something I can only describe as pure, unadulterated hatred. "Dad," she muttered as she walked past me, but her tone did not hold a single drop of love or remorse. It held heavy resentment, as if I were somehow the one entirely to blame for her current situation. "Are you really going to do this? Are you honestly going to destroy your very own family?" I did not answer her. I simply could not. Seeing my daughter, seeing my little girl in that terrible situation broke my heart into a million pieces. But knowing that she still actively blamed me for her own actions fully confirmed that I had made the right choice. Emily was not truly sorry. She was just incredibly angry that she had gotten caught. The judge, an older man named Judge Miller, walked in, and the hearing officially began. "The state versus Emily Davis," the court clerk announced loudly. "Charges of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent." As the prosecutor began reading off the highly specific details of all the charges, describing exactly how Emily had plotted my death, how she had actively researched poisoning methods, and how she had written out detailed task lists, my daughter slowly sank down into her chair. For the very first time, she truly seemed to comprehend the sheer magnitude of what she had actually done. "How do you plead?" the judge asked, looking directly down at Emily. Her defense attorney, a young man who seemed overwhelmed by the severity of the case, whispered something in her ear. "Not guilty," Sarah said with a barely audible voice. But when the prosecutor started presenting the evidence, the vial of Oleander, the letter written in her own handwriting, the internet searches, Her face completely crumbled. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the defendant meticulously planned the murder of her own father to obtain an inheritance of almost $2.5 million. We have physical evidence, documents written by the defendant, and a direct confession." He held up the envelope containing all the evidence. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated murder that failed only by chance. The defense attorney tried to argue for bail, explaining that Sarah was a mother, had no criminal record, and had been under extreme pressure due to her husband's debts. But the prosecutor countered that someone capable of planning the murder of their own father was an extreme danger to society. "Furthermore, Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "we found evidence that the defendant had alternative backup plans to murder the victim if the poisoning failed. This shows a persistent determination to commit this crime." His words echoed throughout the courtroom like a death sentence. During this entire legal exchange, Sarah looked at me constantly, but it was not the look of a remorseful daughter asking her father for forgiveness. It was the look of someone who felt betrayed, as if I had done something terrible by reporting her attempt to murder me. When the judge finally spoke, his voice filled the room with absolute authority. Given the premeditated nature of these crimes, the overwhelming evidence presented, and the fact that the victim is the defendant's own father, I consider that the defendant represents an extreme danger to the community. He looked directly at Sarah. "Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until the trial." The sound of the judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Sarah completely collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dad!" she screamed as the officers took her away. "Dad, please, you cannot do this." "I am your daughter, your only family." But I remained silent. Seeing my daughter being led away in handcuffs was one of the most painful moments of my life, but also the most necessary. For the first time in 37 years, I was not running to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. Ryan walked us out of the courthouse. "Now comes the hard part," he explained. "The legal process is going to take months. Sarah will probably try to negotiate a plea deal to reduce her sentence." He looked at me with compassion. "Lawrence, are you ready for this? Because it is going to get worse before it gets better." "I am ready," I replied, and for the first time in days, I truly believed it. I am ready to do what I should have done years ago, to let Sarah face the real consequences of her decisions. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions. Sarah tried to contact me multiple times from jail, phone calls that I rejected, letters that Carol intercepted before I could read them, and even attempts to send messages through other people. But I stood firm in my decision to have no contact with her. The certainty of what I had discovered was unshakable, but my fatherly heart still struggled with reality. A week after the arrest, I was reviewing some documents with Ryan when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Mr. Lawrence Parker?" a male voice asked when I answered. "Yes, that is me." "I am Victor Vance," the man said, and my blood ran cold. He was the loan shark that Alex owed money to. "We need to talk about your daughter and your son-in-law." My mind was racing. How had he gotten my number? Was this a threat? "I have nothing to discuss with you," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "Mr. Parker, I know you are angry with them, and you have every right to be. They tried to kill you, but there is something you should know. Despite my better judgment, curiosity got the best of me. What is it that I should know?" "Your daughter came to see me a month ago," Vance said. "She offered me a deal. She said she would soon have access to a large amount of money because her father was going to die. She asked me to wait and not to hurt Alex." He paused. "But what I really wanted to tell you is that she also offered to pay me extra if I could get her certain chemicals that are hard to obtain, products that leave no trace." My heart stopped. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have a daughter Sarah's age," Vance replied, surprising me. "And as much of a criminal as I might be, there are lines I do not cross. Patricide is one of them." "What do you want from me?" I asked, still suspicious. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that you made the right decision by turning her in. She is not the person you think you know." After hanging up, I stared at the phone, trying to process what I had just heard. Had Sarah actively sought out a criminal to obtain undetectable poisons? How far would she have gone? I shared the information with Ryan, who immediately passed it on to the prosecutors. This would further strengthen the case against Sarah and Alex. That same afternoon, I received another call, this time from Sarah's lawyer. "Mr. Parker, my client wishes to see you. She says she has crucial information that she only wants to share with you." "I am not interested," I replied firmly. "She insists it is about your safety. She says there are other people involved who might try to hurt you." For a moment, I hesitated. What if she was telling the truth? What if there were more dangers I was unaware of? I consulted with Ryan, who advised caution but did not rule out the possibility of a supervised meeting. "It could be an attempt at manipulation," he warned, "but it could also contain valuable information. If you decide to go, I will go with you, and it will be in a prison visiting room with guards present." I finally agreed to see Sarah, more to close a chapter than because I believed her supposed revelations. The prison was a gray, depressing building on the outskirts of Seattle. After passing through multiple security checks, I was led to a small visiting room where Sarah was already waiting, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed to the table. When she saw me enter, a mixture of emotions crossed her face: hope, fear, shame, and something else I could not identify. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking with tears. "Thank you for coming." "I did not come for you," I replied coldly. "I came because you mentioned a danger to me." Her face fell at my tone, but she quickly composed herself. "Yes, there is something you need to know. Alex was not just working with Victor Vance. There are more dangerous people involved. People who might come after you now that we are in here." "Why would they do that?" I asked, skeptical. "Because Alex told them they would get their money from your inheritance. Now that that plan has failed, they might try to get it another way." I looked at her closely, trying to discern if she was telling the truth or if it was just another manipulation attempt. "Do you have names? Anything concrete I can give to the police?" Her eyes avoided mine. "Not exactly. Alex handled that part. I just know they are dangerous." "Sarah," I said with a firm voice, "if you were truly worried about my safety, you would have concrete information to give me, not vague warnings." Something shifted in her expression then, as if her mask slipped momentarily. "Why are you so angry with me?" she asked, completely changing the subject. "You know Alex forced me to do this. He threatened me. He manipulated me. Did he force you to research poisons? Did he force you to write a detailed manual on how to kill me? Did he force you to calculate every last dollar of my inheritance?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "I have seen the evidence, Sarah. Everything was in your handwriting, your plans, your calculations. You do not understand," she insisted, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "I was terrified. If I did not do what Alex said, he would have killed me first." "Then why did the plans include poisoning Alex too after my death? Why did your notes detail how you would keep all the money for yourself?" Her face went pale. She clearly did not know we had found that information. That is not true." "Sarah," I said, standing up. "I came here expecting. I do not know what I expected. Maybe an explanation, maybe sincere remorse. But you are still lying, even now, even when all the evidence is against you." "Dad, please," she cried out, trying to reach for me but restrained by the handcuffs. "I am telling you the truth now. There are dangerous people after you. You cannot just ignore my warning." I headed toward the door. "I will pass your concern on to the police. They will decide if there is a real threat or if it is just another one of your manipulation attempts." "So you are just abandoning me here," she screamed, her voice now full of rage. "After everything you did, after how you treated me my whole life, you are leaving me to rot in jail." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob, confused by her words. "What are you talking about? I have given you everything." "You gave me everything except what I really needed." Her voice was now a heart-wrenching scream. "You never got over Mom's death. You never saw me for who I really was. You always compared me to her, always expecting me to be her replacement." Her words hit me like a physical punch. Was that what she really thought? Was that how she felt? Sarah, that is not true. I loved you for you, always. Liar, she spat. It always was. Your mother would have been so proud. Your mother used to do it like this. You are just like your mother. I was never Sarah to you. I was always Mom's ghost. The guard approached, alarmed by the rising volume. Is everything all right here? I nodded weakly. The visit is over. As I walked away, Sarah's screams echoed down the hallway. You abandoned me when I needed you most, just like you abandoned Mom when she got sick. Her words were poisoned arrows, designed to cause maximum pain. And they worked. I left the prison feeling shattered, questioning every decision I had made as a father. Ryan was waiting for me outside. Are you okay? He asked, clearly worried by my expression. I do not know, I answered honestly. Sarah says things that make me question if I somehow failed her as a father. Lawrence, Ryan said firmly, this is what manipulators do. They make you doubt yourself. They make you feel guilty for their actions. Do not fall into that trap. He nodded toward the car. Come on, Carol is waiting. You have people who actually care about you. The drive back home was silent, my mind swarming with Sarah's accusations. Was there any truth to them? Had I constantly compared her to Lucy? Had I made her feel like she was never enough? When we arrived at Carol's house, she was waiting for me with coffee and her usual reassuring smile. How did it go? She asked, guiding me into the kitchen. I told her about the meeting, about Sarah's vague warnings and her hurtful accusations. And do you think she is right? Carol asked after listening to everything. I do not know, I admitted. Maybe I unconsciously compared her to Lucy. Maybe I pushed her too hard. Lawrence, Carol interrupted softly but firmly. Stop. You cannot take responsibility for Sarah's actions. Many parents lose their spouses and raise children alone without those children trying to murder them. Her words, though harsh, contained a truth I needed to hear. Even if you made mistakes as a father, and all fathers make them, nothing justifies what Sarah tried to do. Nothing. That night, for the first time since the poisoning attempt, I cried. I cried for the daughter I thought I knew and who I had lost forever. I cried for the years we had spent together, the memories that were now stained by betrayal. I cried for the future we would never have. But when the tears finally dried, I felt a strange peace. The visit to the prison, though painful, had been necessary. I had seen Sarah without her masks. I had confronted the reality of who she truly was. And although my heart would continue to carry the weight of what happened, I knew I had made the right decision by turning her in, not just for my own safety, but for justice. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Smith. Mr. Parker, we looked into Sarah's warning about potential threats to your safety. And? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. It seems it was another manipulation attempt. Alex has been cooperating with us to reduce his sentence and confirmed there are no other dangerous people involved. It was just Victor Vance, and he is already under police surveillance. I sighed, half relieved, half disappointed. Even in jail, Sarah kept lying. Thank you for checking on that, Detective. You are welcome. And, Mr. Parker, this will be over soon. The prosecutor has informed me that Sarah will likely accept a plea deal. The evidence is simply overwhelming. After hanging up, I looked out Carol's kitchen window, watching the small garden where she grew aromatic herbs. Life went on, even after the deepest betrayal. Good news? Carol asked, walking in with a breakfast tray. Sarah was lying about the threats, I replied, and it looks like she will accept a plea deal soon. Carol nodded, sitting across from me. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question for a moment. At peace, I finally said, not happy, not relieved, simply at peace. As if I can finally accept the reality of who Sarah is and move forward. Carol took my hand across the table, her eyes full of affection. Then that is the first step toward healing. And she was right. Despite the pain, despite the betrayal, despite the loss, I had taken the first step toward a new life, A life where I would no longer be defined by Sarah's betrayal, but by my own strength to face it. Welcome back to the channel. If you are just joining us, remember to comment what city you are watching this from. The months following Sarah's arrest were like navigating rough seas. Every day brought a new wave of conflicting emotions. Relief to be safe, guilt for having turned in my own daughter, and a dull ache that had become my constant companion. One October morning, while I was having breakfast with Carol on her patio, Ryan arrived with a folder under his arm and a serious expression that I had learned to recognize. "Good morning, Lawrence." "Carol," he greeted, accepting the cup of coffee Carol offered him. "I have news about the case." "Good or bad?" I asked, mentally preparing myself. "Complicated," he answered, opening the folder. "The prosecution has found new elements in the investigation. It seems Sarah's problems go back further than we thought." He showed me several police reports and witness statements. They have interviewed Sarah's former classmates, employees from her boutique, even her ex-boyfriend from before Alex. "And what did they find out?" Carol asked, leaning in to see the documents. "A disturbing pattern," Ryan continued. "Sarah has shown manipulative behaviors and sociopathic tendencies since she was a teenager. Her ex-boyfriend, Mark Harrison, stated that she faked a pregnancy to keep him around when he wanted to break up. I felt as if I had been physically struck. How had I not seen these signs? Was I so blinded by fatherly love? "There is more," Ryan said, moving to another document. A former employee at the boutique, Emily Foster, claims that Sarah systematically stole from the cash register and then blamed the employees. 3 people were unfairly fired because of that. My mind traveled back in time, remembering the occasions when Sarah had told me about dishonest employees she had been forced to fire. I had sympathized with her, even advising her on how to improve her hiring process. "Why did no one say anything before?" I asked, my voice cracking with disappointment. "Fear," Ryan replied simply. "Sarah was very skilled at intimidating people. Plus, many did not connect these isolated incidents until the murder attempt came to light." Carol squeezed my hand in a silent gesture of support. "There is something else you need to know, Lawrence," Ryan continued, visibly uncomfortable. "The investigation has revealed that Sarah tried to poison you with small doses for months before the final attempt." "What?" I exclaimed, feeling a chill run down my spine. "They found a journal where she documented the doses and your symptoms. She started with tiny amounts of oleander in your morning coffee, about 3 months before the dinner." I suddenly remembered the strange spells of dizziness and fatigue I had experienced in the spring, which I had attributed to my age and stress. "The medical examiner will review your past blood work to look for traces of the poison," Ryan added. "This greatly strengthens the case against her, showing an even higher level of premeditation." "And Alex?" Carol asked. "What does he say about all this?" "He is trying to distance himself as much as possible from Sarah," Ryan replied. "He claims he knew nothing about the previous poisonings, that he only found out about the final plan days before executing it." "Do you believe him?" I asked. Ryan shrugged. "It does not matter what I believe. What matters is what the judges will believe, and the evidence is not doing him any favors. They found text messages where they openly discussed the plan." While Ryan continued detailing the investigation's findings, my mind wandered to moments from the past. 5-year-old Sarah, laughing as we built sandcastles on Santa Monica Beach. Teenage Sarah, radiant at her high school graduation. Sarah, on the day she opened her boutique, full of dreams and ambitions. When had that little girl gotten lost? Or had she never truly existed, and I had only seen what I wanted to see? "Lawrence." Carol's voice brought me back to the present. "Ryan is asking if you want to be present at the next hearing." "I am sorry. I was lost in my thoughts," I apologized. "When is it?" "Friday," Ryan replied. "Sarah and her lawyer have requested a hearing to discuss a possible plea deal. It seems they finally realize how overwhelming the evidence against them is." "What kind of deal?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "The prosecutor is willing to reduce the charges to second-degree attempted murder in exchange for a guilty plea. This would mean between 10 and 15 years in prison, instead of the 15 to 25 she would face if it goes to a full trial." 15 years. My daughter would spend the next 15 years in prison. The reality of the situation hit me with full force. "Will you be there?" Carol asked softly. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to be there, to face her one more time, but another part is afraid I will not be able to handle it." "You do not have to decide right now," Ryan said. "Think about it and let me know tomorrow." After Ryan left, Carol and I sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The birds singing in her garden seemed jarring against the heaviness in my heart. "Do you know what the hardest part of all this is?" I finally said, breaking the silence. "It is not the murder attempt itself. It is realizing that I never really knew my own daughter." Carol nodded understandingly. "It is a form of grief, Lawrence. You are mourning not just the loss of Sarah in your life, but the loss of who you thought she was." "Exactly," I sighed. "My whole life I thought I was a good father, that we had a special relationship. Now I wonder if it was all an illusion." "Not everything was an illusion," Carol said firmly. "Your feelings for her were real. Your dedication as a father was real. The fact that she did not reciprocate in the same way does not invalidate your love for her." Her words, though comforting, could not fill the void I felt. That night, while trying to sleep in Carol's guest bedroom, which had become my temporary sanctuary, I found myself reliving every significant moment with Sarah, searching for clues I had missed, signs I should have seen. Had she always been like this, manipulative and calculating, or was there something I had done or failed to do that pushed her down that path? The accusations she had thrown at me during our prison visit echoed in my mind. Had I really constantly compared her to her mother? Had I made her feel inadequate? Friday arrived entirely too fast. After a sleepless night, I made my decision. I would attend the hearing. I needed to be present, not just out of a sense of responsibility, but because it was part of my own process of healing and acceptance. Ryan picked me up at 9, and during the drive to the courthouse, he explained exactly what to expect. The hearing will be brief and formal. The judge will ask Sarah if she understands the terms of the agreement and if she is pleading guilty voluntarily. Then, he will set a date for the sentencing hearing. "And me?" I asked. "Will I have to speak?" "Not today," he replied. "At the sentencing hearing, you will have the opportunity to read a victim impact statement if you wish. It is your chance to express how the crime has affected you." The courtroom was more crowded than at the previous hearing. Several reporters were waiting outside, and seeing me arrive, they approached with questions and camera flashes. Ryan shielded me from their onslaught, quickly guiding me inside. Sarah was already there, sitting next to her lawyer. She wore the same orange jumpsuit, but her appearance was different. She had lost weight, and her face, once always carefully made up, now showed a sickly pallor. Our eyes met briefly, and in her eyes, I saw something I did not expect: resignation. It was not the combative Sarah from our last meeting, hurling accusations and manipulating. It was someone who had finally grasped the gravity of her situation. The judge entered, and the hearing began. As Ryan had predicted, it was a brief and technical procedure. The prosecutor explained the terms of the plea deal, and the judge asked Sarah if she fully understood them. "Yes, Your Honor," she answered in a subdued voice. "And you plead guilty voluntarily, without coercion or promises outside those established in this agreement?" There was a moment of silence, an instant where time seemed to stand still. Sarah looked in my direction one more time before answering. "Guilty, Your Honor." Those two words, spoken quietly but clearly, sealed her fate. The judge scheduled the sentencing hearing for 3 weeks later, and with a strike of his gavel, the session was adjourned. As the guards led Sarah away, she stopped and looked back at me. "Dad," she said, loud enough for me to hear, but not a shout, "I am sorry." I could not respond. I did not know if her words were sincere or just another tactic, and at that moment, I was not sure it mattered. The damage was already done, and the consequences were in motion. The 3 weeks between the guilty plea and the sentencing hearing were a period of intense reflection. With Carol's help and a therapist Ryan had recommended, I began to process everything that had happened from a new perspective. "Doctor, Miller, a psychologist specializing in family trauma, helped me see that my relationship with Sarah had always been complex. The early loss of her mother created a void in her, he explained during one of our sessions. And although you did everything possible to compensate for it, some voids cannot be filled by another person. Are you saying it was inevitable that she became what she is? I asked, uncomfortable with the implication. No, not at all, he replied firmly. Many people suffer traumatic losses without turning into criminals. Sarah made her own choices. What I am trying to get you to understand is that you should not blame yourself for not being able to save her from herself. Those conversations were painful but necessary. Little by little, I began separating the irrational guilt I felt as a father from the objective acknowledgement of Sarah's responsibility for her own actions. During that time, I also received an unexpected letter. It was from Linda Vance, Alex's mother and Sarah's mother-in-law. "Dear Mr. Parker," she wrote in shaky handwriting, "I have learned from the news what my son and your daughter tried to do to you. I have no words to express my shame and horror. I want you to know that I, too, was a victim of theirs. 2 years ago, Sarah pushed me down the stairs of my house. Everyone believed it was an accident, but I always knew it was not. I said nothing out of fear of losing contact with my son. Now I deeply regret my silence. If I had spoken up then, maybe you would not have gone through this terrible experience. I ask for your forgiveness, even though I know I do not deserve it." The letter went on to detail other incidents where Linda had observed troubling behaviors in Sarah, as well as Alex's growing gambling addiction. I shared it with Ryan, who added it to the growing case file. Every day, new witnesses and evidence surfaced that reinforced Sarah's pattern of manipulative and potentially violent behavior. Her ex-boyfriend's mother stated that Sarah had vandalized her car after the breakup. A former business partner claimed she had threatened to ruin his life if he did not accept a disadvantageous deal. The picture that emerged was of a person with deep psychological issues who had managed to hide them under a facade of normalcy for years. The day of the sentencing hearing dawned rainy, as if the sky itself shared my mood. Carol insisted on coming with me, despite my initial resistance. "You do not have to do this alone, Lawrence," she said as we ate breakfast. "Stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for once." The courthouse was even more packed than at the previous hearing. The case had caught the attention of national media, and the story of the businessman father who survived a murder attempt by his own daughter had sparked fascination and horror in equal measure. Sarah walked in escorted by 2 guards. Her appearance had improved slightly since the last time, as if she had made an effort to look more presentable for this crucial hearing. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. Judge Martinez opened the session formally, explaining the purpose of the hearing and the possible sentencing range according to the plea deal reached. Before pronouncing the sentence, we will first hear from the prosecution and then the defense. Afterward, the defendant will have the opportunity to address the court. Finally, the victim, Mr. Lawrence Parker, may deliver his impact statement. The prosecutor presented a hard-hitting summary of the case, highlighting the premeditation, the cruelty, and the fundamental betrayal. "Your Honor, we are looking at one of the most serious acts a human being can commit, attempting to murder the very father who gave you life. The defendant did not act on impulse or in a moment of confusion, but meticulously planned her father's death for months, experimenting with poison doses, calculating her inheritance, and even planning how she would act during the funeral. He went on to detail all the evidence found and the testimonies gathered, building a devastating case against Sarah. Due to the severity of the crime and the danger the defendant poses to society, we request the maximum penalty within the plea agreement, 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The defense attorney did what he could with a practically indefensible case. He spoke of Sarah's traumatic childhood after losing her mother, the alleged manipulative influence of Alex, and her lack of a prior criminal record. "Your Honor, we acknowledge the severity of the crime, and my client has accepted her responsibility by pleading guilty, but we ask you to consider the mitigating circumstances and her potential for rehabilitation. We request the minimum sentence of 10 years, with the possibility of review after serving 2/3 of the term." When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood up slowly. She seemed to have aged years in the months since her arrest. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling but audible, "there is no excuse for what I did. I have had a lot of time to reflect since my arrest, and I realize the horror of my actions." She turned partially toward where I was sitting. "Dad, I know you will probably never be able to forgive me, and I do not blame you for that. What I did is unforgivable. I just want you to know that even though I try to understand why I did it, not even I fully comprehend it." Her words sounded sincere, but after so much deceit, I found it impossible to judge their authenticity. "I accept whatever punishment the court deems fair," she concluded, sitting back down. Finally, it was my turn. Ryan had helped me prepare my statement, but at the last minute, I decided to speak from the heart instead of reading the prepared text. I stood up, feeling the weight of every gaze upon me. At 71 years old, I had faced many challenges in life, but none as painful as this moment. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Over the past few months, I have tried to understand how we got to this point. I have reviewed every decision I made as a father, every moment I shared with my daughter, looking for signs I might have missed." I paused, taking a deep breath. Sarah was my only family after losing my wife. I raised her the best I knew how, trying to compensate for her mother's absence. I worked hard to give her a life of opportunities and privilege. I was by her side for every important moment of her life. I looked directly at Sarah, whose eyes were already brimming with tears. But today I understand that no matter how much love you give someone, you cannot force them to love you back. You cannot control who that person becomes. Sarah chose her own path, and that path led her to plan my death for money. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. I am not here to ask for vengeance. Vengeance would not give me back what I have lost. I am here to ask for justice and to close a painful chapter in my life. I addressed the judge again. "Your Honor, whatever sentence you impose today, I want you to know that I have already handed down my own. I release myself from the weight of the guilt I have carried. I am not responsible for my daughter's choices, and I refuse to keep punishing myself for her actions." I looked back at Sarah one last time. "From today on, I choose to live whatever time I have left in peace, surrounded by people who truly care about me. And that is perhaps the harshest sentence for Sarah, knowing that I will move forward without her." When I returned to my seat, I felt Carol's hand squeezing mine in a show of support. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Martinez deliberated for several minutes before pronouncing the sentence. When he finally spoke, his voice rang with authority and conviction. "Sarah Parker Vance, you have pleaded guilty to second-degree attempted murder against your own father. This court has carefully considered all the circumstances of the case, the severity of the crime, its level of premeditation, and the impact on the victim." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "I have also heard your statement of remorse and the mitigating circumstances presented by your defense. However, the coldness and calculated precision with which you planned this crime against the person who gave you life and cared for you your entire existence requires a severe response from justice." Sarah remained completely still, as if turned to stone. "Therefore, I sentence Sarah Parker Vance to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Furthermore, a permanent restraining order is issued, prohibiting any contact with Mr. Lawrence Parker during and after serving your sentence." The strike of the gavel sealed Sarah's fate. As the guards approached to take her away, she looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her eyes now, only a deep sadness, and perhaps, finally, some genuine understanding of what she had done. I walked out of the courthouse feeling strangely light, as if a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The rain had stopped, and a timid sun was breaking through the clouds. "Are you okay?" Carol asked as we walked toward the car. "I think so," I replied, surprised by the truth in my own words. For the first time in months, I think I will truly be okay. The months following the sentencing were a period of transformation and healing. With the help of Carol and Dr. Miller, I began rebuilding my life on new foundations. The first thing I did was sell my textile company. For 40 years, it had been the center of my existence, but now it represented a chapter I needed to close. The corporation that bought it paid much more than I expected, guaranteeing me a financial stability I could never exhaust in the time I had left. "Are you sure about this?" Carol asked as I signed the final sale documents. "That company has been your life." "That is exactly why I need to let it go," I answered. "I do not want my identity to remain tied to being Lawrence the textile businessman. I want to discover who I am now, at 72 years old, without all those labels and expectations." The next step was harder, selling the coastal house where I had lived with Lucy and raised Sarah. Every corner of that house held memories, some precious and others now painfully tainted by Sarah's betrayal. With Carol's help, I spent weeks sorting through possessions, what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. It was a cathartic process, a physical way of separating the valuable from the toxic in my life. Among the boxes of family photographs, I found an album I had not seen in years. It contained pictures of a pregnant Lucy, radiant and beautiful, full of hope for the future. "She was so beautiful," Carol commented, looking over my shoulder. "Sarah looks a lot like her." "Yes," I nodded, feeling a twinge of pain. Lucy had her physical appearance, but not her heart. Lucy was pure kindness. "Do you think she would have been able to see the signs in Sarah?" Carol asked softly. "That she would have noticed what you could not see?" The question made me think. Maybe. Lucy always had a special intuition for people, or maybe her presence would have changed how Sarah developed. We will never know. With the money from the sale of the company and the house, I bought a small but cozy country house on the outskirts of Los Angeles. It was only 2 miles from Carol, close enough to visit easily but maintaining our independence. My new house had a large backyard that soon became my therapy. Planting, pruning, watching the flowers and fruit trees grow connected me with the natural cycle of life in a way I found deeply comforting. One day, while working in the yard, I received an unexpected visit. It was Mike Peterson, my former chief financial officer and the one who had initially investigated Sarah's finances. "Mr. Parker," he greeted with a warm smile, "Carol gave me your address. I hope I am not intruding." "Mike, what a joy to see you," I responded sincerely, inviting him in. "I never had the chance to properly thank you. If it were not for your investigation, I might not be alive today." Sitting on the patio with fresh iced tea, Mike caught me up on the company and its new management. Then, with some hesitation, he pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "Mr. Parker, there is something I think you should know." I hesitated to share it, but I believe you have the right to be informed. Inside the envelope were financial documents and several photographs. The photos showed Alex with several shady-looking men in what looked like an underground casino. "Alex has been cooperating with the prosecution to reduce his sentence," Mike explained. "He has provided information about a network of illegal casinos and loan sharks operating in Los Angeles and San Diego." "Does this affect Sarah in any way?" I asked, unsure why Mike thought it was important to show me. "Not directly," he answered. "But there is something else. In his testimony, Alex mentioned that Sarah had a backup plan if the poisoning failed. Hiring someone to rob you and accidentally kill you during the mugging. I felt a chill run down my spine. "And you are telling me this because?" "Because I want you to know that you made the right decision turning her in," Mike said firmly. "Sarah would not have stopped. And because I want you to be on high alert. Alex has implicated dangerous people with his testimony. And even though you are not directly involved, your association with the case could potentially put you in danger." I absorbed this new information with a calm that surprised even me. A few months ago, such a revelation would have devastated me. Now, although disturbing, it merely confirmed what I had already accepted about Sarah. "Thank you for the warning, Mike. I will take extra precautions." After Mike left, I called Carol and told her about the visit. True to her practical nature, she immediately suggested installing a more comprehensive security system at my house and keeping in regular touch. "Information is power, Lawrence," she said. "Now that you know this, you can protect yourself better." A week after Mike's visit, I received another surprise. A letter from Sarah from prison. Carol, always protective, suggested I throw it away without reading it. "She will just try to manipulate you again," she warned. "You do not need to expose yourself to that." But something in me needed to know what she had to say. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe one last hope for understanding. "Dear Dad," the letter began. I have started this letter hundreds of times in my head, searching for words that probably do not exist. How do you apologize to someone for trying to take their life? How do you explain the unexplainable? The letter went on to reflect on her childhood, her relationship with Alex, and the choices that led her to plan my death. She admitted to her gambling addiction, something she had hidden even from Alex, and how her own debts, added to his, had pushed them into a desperate situation. "Alex suggested the poison idea," she wrote, "but I developed it. It would be dishonest to blame only him. Something inside me was broken long before I met him. Now, with the help of the prison psychologists, I am beginning to understand that my problem goes beyond my circumstances. There is something fundamentally flawed in the way I relate to others and process my emotions." The letter ended with a plea that left me breathless. "I am not asking you to forgive me, Dad. I do not deserve your forgiveness. I only ask that you try to be happy, that you find peace, that you build a new life where my shadow does not haunt you. And I want you to know that, despite everything I did, somewhere inside me, buried under layers of damage and distortion, I always loved you. Even when I was planning the unthinkable, a part of me fought against it. It was not enough to stop me, and for that I will live with remorse for the rest of my life. With love, despite everything, Sarah." I read the letter several times, searching for signs of manipulation or falsehood, but for the first time, Sarah's words seemed genuinely reflective, lacking the manipulative subtext I was used to. I shared it with Dr. Miller during our next session. "Do you think she is being sincere?" I asked after he read it. "It is possible," he answered cautiously. "Prison and real-world consequences sometimes produce genuine introspection. But it is also important to remember that people with personality disorders can be very convincing even when they are not sincere." "Should I answer her?" Dr. Miller reflected before responding. "That is a very personal decision, Lawrence. There is no right or wrong answer. The question is, what do you need for your own healing? Would answering her help you close this chapter, or would it reopen old wounds?" I decided not to answer immediately. Instead, I put the letter away and let her words settle within me. With time, perhaps I would find clarity on what I wanted to do. Meanwhile, my life continued to transform in unexpected and positive ways. Following a suggestion from Carol, I started attending a support group for survivors of family violence. There, listening to the stories of others, I found a community that understood my experience in a way no one else could. "The hardest thing is that people do not understand the complexity of our feelings," commented a woman named Elena during one session. "They think we should simply hate those who hurt us. They do not understand that we can also miss them, worry about them, even still love them, while recognizing that we cannot have them in our lives." Her words resonated deeply with me. They perfectly described the ambivalence I felt towards Sarah, the love that still lingered alongside the pain and betrayal. Over time, I began to share my own story in the group, at first with reluctance, then with growing openness. Articulating my experience out loud, seeing myself reflected and understood in the eyes of others, was profoundly therapeutic. One day, the group coordinator asked me to speak at a seminar for mental health professionals about the impact of family abuse on older adults. "Your perspective is invaluable, Lawrence," she insisted. "There is very little awareness about how older adults can be victims of abuse by their own children." I nervously accepted. I had never been good at public speaking, but I felt that sharing my experience could help others. The seminar took place at the State University, in front of an auditorium filled with psychologists, social workers, and students. With Carol in the front row giving me moral support, I recounted my story. The years of subtle manipulations I failed to recognize, the red flags I ignored, and finally, the poisoning attempt that changed everything. "The most dangerous thing," I concluded, "is that as parents, We are wired to trust our children, to justify, excuse, and forgive their behavior. This makes us especially vulnerable to manipulation and abuse. The questions and comments that followed showed me that my story had struck a nerve. Many professionals shared similar cases, and together we discussed ways to identify and prevent these situations. At the end of the seminar, a woman around my age approached with tears in her eyes. "Your story is my story," she said, taking my hands in hers, "but I did not have your courage to report my son. I have endured financial and emotional abuse for years because I am terrified of ending up alone. Today, you have given me the strength I needed to seek help." Her words moved me deeply. Perhaps, out of all the pain and betrayal, something positive could emerge: the ability to help others in similar situations. In the following weeks, I received more invitations to speak at community centers, retirement homes, and local radio shows. My personal story became a vehicle to raise awareness about an often ignored problem. Carol often accompanied me, supporting me with her serene presence and sharp sense of humor. Our friendship deepened with each shared experience, becoming the most stable anchor of my new life. One afternoon, while enjoying coffee in her yard, Carol surprised me with a question. "Have you thought about replying to Sarah's letter?" It had been almost 2 months since I received it, and although I had read it many times, I had not yet made up my mind to reply. "I think about it constantly," I admitted. "Part of me wants to close this chapter with some kind of response. Another part is afraid to reopen wounds that are barely starting to heal." Carol nodded understandingly. "And what is your heart telling you?" I thought for a moment before answering. "My heart says I need to give this story an ending. Not for Sarah, but for me." That night, sitting in my study overlooking the yard I had cultivated with so much love, I wrote my reply to Sarah. They were the hardest words I had ever written, but also the most liberating. "Sarah," I began, intentionally leaving out any term of endearment. "I have read your letter many times, trying to discern its sincerity. I cannot say for certain if I believe in your remorse, but I have decided to accept it as genuine, not because your actions deserve it, but because I need to move forward." I continued writing about my new life, the lessons I had learned, and how her betrayal, paradoxically, had freed me from destructive patterns I did not know I was perpetuating. For decades, I centered my life on being a good father to you, on compensating for your mother's absence. I now understand that was not my only purpose. I am discovering who I am beyond being Sarah's father, and it is a surprisingly comforting revelation. I ended the letter simply but definitively. "I do not hate you, Sarah. Hate requires an emotional investment that I am no longer willing to make. I have released you from the central role in my life, and in doing so, I have freed myself. I hope you find peace and understanding during your time in prison. Perhaps one day you will be able to rebuild a meaningful life, but it will be a life separate from mine. Lawrence." I mailed the letter the next day, feeling as though I had dropped an enormous weight into the mailbox along with the envelope. Whatever Sarah's reaction might be, I had said what I needed to say. My part in this story had concluded. A year after the trial, my life had completely transformed. The small country house had become a true home, with a blossoming garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. I had adopted a dog from the local shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Duke, who became my loyal companion. My relationship with Carol had evolved into a deep friendship that surprised us both. At our ages, she at 68, I at 72, we never expected to find such a meaningful connection. It was not romance in the conventional sense, but something equally valuable, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared interests, and the unconditional support we offered each other. We spent many afternoons together, sometimes at her house, sometimes at mine. We cooked, shared books, watched old movies, or simply talked for hours about everything and nothing. Without pressure or expectations, we enjoyed each other's company with a comfort that only maturity can bring. One Sunday morning, while having breakfast on my patio, Carol brought up an idea she had been considering. "Lawrence, have you ever thought about writing your story?" "You mean the thing with Sarah?" I asked, surprised. "I do not think that is exactly bestseller material." "Not just that," she explained. Your whole life. How you built your company from the ground up after losing Lucy, how you raised Sarah alone, and yes, also how you survived her betrayal and rebuilt your life. It is a story of resilience that could help a lot of people. The idea intrigued me. During my talks in support groups and community centers, I had seen how sharing my experience resonated with others. Perhaps putting it into a book would broaden that impact. I am not a writer, Carol. You do not need to be, she replied with that smile that lit up her eyes. You could collaborate with someone. Actually, I know a journalist who specializes in life stories. She was a student of mine years ago and now works on social interest topics. And so began a new project that would occupy the following months. Emily Simmons, Carol's former student, turned out to be the perfect collaborator, respectful of my story, but objective enough to give it literary shape. Our sessions, often with Carol present, became a cathartic process. Reliving certain moments was painful, but also revealing. Emily helped me see patterns and connections I had not noticed before. It is fascinating how early traumas can repeat themselves in patterns throughout life, Emily commented during one of our conversations. You lost your father young, then Lucy, and finally your relationship with Sarah. And yet, every time you found a way to reinvent yourself, while the manuscript took shape, my life continued to expand in new directions. Following a suggestion from Dr. Miller, I started taking painting classes at a nearby cultural center. I had never considered myself artistically talented, but I discovered a profound pleasure in mixing colors and capturing the landscapes of my new surroundings on canvas. My paintings would not win any awards, but they provided me with a form of expression I had never experienced before. Carol, for her part, introduced me to the book club she had formed with former university colleagues. Suddenly, I found myself debating contemporary novels and literary classics with a group of smart, passionate people who became new friends. As my social circle expanded, Sarah's absence felt less like a painful void and more like a space that was being filled with new connections and experiences. I received another letter from Sarah 6 months after sending my reply. It was shorter than the previous one, but equally reflective. Dad, she wrote, I understand and respect your decision to part ways. I expected nothing less. I want you to know that your letter did not cause me pain, but rather a strange relief. The clarity of your words helped me accept the consequences of my actions in a way I had not managed before. She went on to tell me about her participation in intensive therapy programs and her recent diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic traits. I do not use this as an excuse, she clarified, but as a tool to understand myself and maybe one day be a different person. The road is long, and I have no illusions about recovering what I destroyed. I only hope that, wherever you are, life treats you with the kindness you deserve. I shared the letter with Carol and Dr. Miller. Both agreed that it showed significant progress in Sarah's self-awareness, though they warned against over-interpreting a single communication. People with these disorders can show moments of clarity and introspection, Dr. Miller explained. The important thing is the long-term pattern, not isolated statements. I decided not to answer this time, not out of coldness, but because I felt I had already said everything I needed to say. Our lives were on separate paths now, and that was okay. The following spring brought the release of our book, titled The Unbreakable Will: Survival and Rebirth After Family Betrayal. Emily had done an extraordinary job capturing my voice while shaping a cohesive narrative. The publisher organized a small launch event at a bookstore in Los Angeles. To my surprise, the event drew more people than the space could hold: local journalists, mental health professionals, and many people who had heard my talks or attended the same support groups. I never thought I would be presenting a book at 73 years old, I nervously commented to Carol while we waited for the event to begin. Life always has surprises in store, Lawrence, she replied, straightening my shirt collar with an affectionate gesture. Some terrible, some wonderful. The presentation was a success. I spoke briefly about my experiences, read a few excerpts from the book, and answered questions from the audience. Many people came up afterward to share their own stories of family betrayal and resilience. A young woman, about 30 years old, waited until the end of the line to speak with me. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice trembling, "my name is Mary Louise. I am Alex's cousin." My body tensed instinctively, but her open expression and tear-filled eyes made me listen. "I wanted to apologize on behalf of our family," she continued. "What Alex and Sarah did to you is unforgivable, and many of us live with the shame of being associated with this. You do not have to apologize for the actions of others," I replied, moved by her sincerity. "I know, but I wanted you to know that we are not all like that, and I also wanted to thank you for sharing your story. It has helped me process my own feelings of guilt and shame." Her honesty reminded me that the ripples of a family betrayal extend far beyond the direct victims and perpetrators. Entire families are scarred, struggling with complex emotions and unanswered questions. That night, as Carol and I celebrated the success of the event with a quiet dinner at my house, I reflected on the journey. "Do you know what the most surprising part of all this is?" I said while serving dessert, a pecan pie Carol had baked. "That out of something so horrible, so much good could emerge." "What exactly do you mean?" she asked. "All of this." I gestured around the house, the yard visible through the windows, the paintings I had done hanging on the walls. My life before revolved around the company and Sarah. Now I have true friends, new interests, a purpose that goes beyond accumulating money or pleasing my daughter. "Adversity has that strange power," Carol agreed. "It shatters us, but in the process, it gives us the opportunity to rebuild ourselves in a more authentic way." The following months saw the unexpected growth of the book's impact. I received invitations to speak at conferences on family violence, national radio shows, and even a university in New York that wanted to include my story in a forensic psychology course. Carol accompanied me on many of these trips, becoming my confidant and unconditional support. Our relationship continued to deepen, defined by mutual respect and genuine affection. In the fall, I decided to host a dinner to celebrate my 73rd birthday. For the first time in my life, I had a diverse and enriching social circle. Carol, of course, Emily and her husband, several friends from the book club, classmates from the painting workshop, Mike and his family, and even Dr. Miller, who had become a friend as well as a therapist. As I watched my guests chatting animatedly around the table in my backyard, decorated with lights and flowers for the occasion, I felt a profound gratitude. I had lost my daughter, yes, but I had gained a chosen family, people who were in my life by mutual choice and real connection, not out of blood obligation. Carol appeared by my side, offering me a glass of wine. "A penny for your thoughts," she said with a smile. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am," I replied sincerely. "Despite everything, you deserve it, Lawrence. You have come a long way." I looked at her. This extraordinary woman who had stood by me in the darkest moments, who had never hesitated to tell me the truth, no matter how hard it was, but always with compassion. "We all have," I said, taking her hand, "and I am glad we have walked part of that road together." Later, when the guests had gone and it was just Carol and I quietly cleaning up, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Lawrence, do you think you could ever forgive Sarah?" I stopped, considering the question seriously. "I do not know," I finally answered. "I do not think forgiveness is something you can force or decide rationally. If it comes, it will come with time. What I do know is that I no longer carry her betrayal as a burden, and that, for me, is enough for now." Carol nodded, understanding. "You know," she continued, "I always admired how you handled all of this. With dignity, without bitterness, finding strength where others might have crumbled. I had help," I smiled, looking at her meaningfully. "A stubborn friend who did not let me fall into self-pity." "Stubborn!" she exclaimed with feigned indignation. "I prefer the term persistently motivational." We laughed together, and in that simple, perfect moment, I knew I had found my place in the world again. Not as a businessman, not as a father, but simply as Lawrence. A man who had faced the worst life had to offer, and had emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and surprisingly, more capable of joy than I had ever imagined. The scar of Sarah's betrayal would always be there, but it no longer defined my existence. It was just a part of my story, not its conclusion. The future stretched out before me, not as a vast, empty expanse to fear, but as a blank canvas full of possibilities. With my new chosen family, with Carol by my side, with projects I was passionate about and a renewed purpose, I was ready to paint the rest of my life with colors I had never before had the courage to use. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever gone through something similar? Welcome to our story family. Comment below, and do not forget to share what city you are watching this story from.